You finished.
Yes, on Saturday.
Wow.
And I watched the PBS with
Yeah.
Tom Hardy that Paola recommended on Saturday.
Oh, wow. Did you like it?
Oh, so
I did like it.
Is it like, I heard it's not that similar to the book. Like, is that true?
It's not similar in that the narrator in the book doesn't exist. It's more just like you're watching them. But in terms of like accuracy, time-wise, it doesn't match up. But story-wise, I felt it did a decent job.
How was Tom?
Delightfully creepy. Like I think like I like how he was kind of like not very how do I say it? Like his voice never got like super loud or he wasn't like with his anger and evilness. It was more subdued and I feel like that made it even creepier.
Isn't it crazy that in real life he married Kathy or the Catherine, the original one? They're married in real life. The one who plays, yeah, he
Tom
met
and
her
the
on the
actress?
set of that movie. Yeah.
Dang.
And they met there?
Yeah.
Wow. So they must have had good chemistry.
Yeah. Like not the older Kathy. It's
yeah, the one that died.
Yeah.
So like the ones who were crazy in love.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually felt crazy in love.
I guess so. Hopefully not crazy because they're still together and that miniseries was like 2009, so they've been together a long time.
Wow. Maybe I'll watch it.
I think the casting was good too.
Yeah, I really liked it. I thought this was probably the more enjoyable section of the book because like some actually good things happened finally. And also like some characters actually like showed like some growth. Like, you know, Heathcliff sort of kind of let go of his obsession with revenge, and Kathy and Hareton, like they got closer and like were able to communicate finally. And even Nellie seems like content like in her new position. And so it was kind of nice because it, unlike the rest of the book where it kept being like every awful thing like would happen and like everybody was just like taking the worst possible life path, it felt like the characters actually sort of like learned from the sins of their fathers or whatever. Like they learned from their mothers and fathers and like chose the healthier path, which I thought was nice.
I was reading, I think, just to make sure I understood. I went to Spark Notes and I was like, you know what? It does make sense that the author kind of was giving hope to the younger generation because it was like, you know, the old Catherine and Heathcliff, they were, I'm gonna say crazy because of how obsessed and passionate they were with each other and just like, I don't know, it seems unrealistic in my mind. And then obviously, you know, he was revengeful and then everything else was kind of just like negative, and they were the ones who were a bit more open and, you know, they calmed down and made things work a little bit better. I still wasn't a big fan of the story though. I don't know if it was the old English, but I also was part I read, part I listened. This last section, all I just listened and I understood it better than, you know, other sections. So I don't know. Maybe if I read it through fully, it'd be different because I think listening really affects whether I like it or not. Yeah.
I did like how Hareton and Kathy kind of got together, even though it's like weird that they're cousins, but it was nice that it kind of ended on that note versus just I thought it was gonna be like a bad ending for everyone, perhaps. So that was kind of refreshing. And I liked that Harrison was trying to improve himself and start reading. I thought like that was nice, given that like he kind of had that taken away from him as a child. So I'm glad that he kind of had that story arc.
I'm still not sure why Lockwood is there, besides getting the chisme
Yeah.
and getting the story of like, hey, what happened here? Hey, what happened there? And, you know, kind of having Nellie tell the story. But I
It
feel like
was.
go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead and finish, Judith.
No, I was just gonna say I feel like Nelly could have, still told the whole story, right? Without
That's
like
a really good
Lockwood
point.
there. Yeah.
I felt like I got a creepy vibe from Lockwood in the last part of the book, especially when he came back and he was like, "Oh, let's see how pretty Kathy ended up." I'm like, "Oh,
I
I
didn't
should have
like
gone for
that.
her when I had the chance." I'm like, "Ew, that's super gross."
Yeah. I think that's why I didn't like it. I'm like, I don't know. Seemed like he
I,
Mhm.
he would have pursued her, and I was like, "Ooh."
I think maybe like the point was to show like a different, like it didn't really make sense when Nellie was just telling him the story for all that
Mhm.
time. But
Mhm.
then when he did interact with the other characters, it was kind of interesting to see how they were from his viewpoint. Like, remember how he was like, oh, Cassie was pretty, but she wasn't that great, like how Nellie
Mhm.
described, and how like that's like the more glaring example. But
Mhm.
it was kind of, I mean, maybe the author was just trying to like show a different viewpoint and like show how, like, depending on how you tell the story, or like we never truly know like exactly how the characters really were because we're hearing like a different version of events.
Yeah.
And maybe it also, like, I don't know, I feel like there was a lot of miscommunication kind of throughout the whole book of these different characters like believing one thing and like
Mhm.
not fully understanding the other.
Mhm.
um where they never were able to fully hash it out and talk through things
Mhm.
until Kathy and Harriton like actually finally like worked through their hurt feelings or their misconceptions, and were actually able to like connect and like, you know see each other for who they were. And
Mhm.
it felt like throughout, like, I mean, like Heathcliff like thinks Kathy like doesn't care about him, even though actually we know that she does.
Mhm.
And then like Kathy thinks, I don't know, like, then like Linton and Heathcliff could never really talk through their issues. They just were like about to fight, and then they just like literally like didn't talk to each other.
Mhm.
um I don't know, like I'm just trying to think of why she did it that way.
Mhm.
Um I do think that it wasn't like, like maybe it would have been more interesting if there had been some more multiple perspectives. But it I mean most of it was from Nellie's perspective, not
Yeah.
from Lockwood.
Lockwood. Yeah.
I wonder, like, if the author made it from Nellie's perspective too, because she saw them as children, so she was like the one that was there throughout the whole time. Since other characters died, like the dad died, then Linton dies, and eventually Heathcliff dies, but she's the only one there to see like how the younger generation was able to surpass, the family trauma. And I also think that the other people had to die because there was no way they were going to be able to make up given the storyline that was happening. Like it would have taken the story in a big different route. So maybe that's why it was like from Ellie's perspective. Because like if Linton died, like we wouldn't know, and it was from his perspective, we wouldn't know what happened with the younger generation. Um, and she was kind of the one going back and forth too throughout the two different households.
I also read that Nellie, I think, was around the same age, or I think maybe 3 or so years older than
Mm-hmm.
was it the old Catherine? And I don't know if it was Heathcliff,
Mm-hmm.
but that means like they were around the same age. So she like saw everything, which I guess that's
Mm-hmm.
why she's a good person to tell the story because she's seen it all. But
Mm-hmm.
obviously there is some bias here and there.
Do we feel like Heathcliff was redeemed by seeing his stepson happy, or I don't know, stepson, what, ward? I don't know, nephew. Do you think that he was redeemed by seeing Hareton happy, or has he been haunted by Kathy this entire time and he finally was like overcome by it and couldn't take it anymore and died?
I think more the second one for me.
I was gonna say, I don't know why I didn't feel like it says it's a gothic novel and stuff like that. Like there's that spookiness in it, but I didn't really get that. Yeah, he was dark and yeah, they mentioned like, oh, he's not really human or but I feel
Mhm.
like they said that because of his skin and everyone else is light and he wasn't.
Mhm.
But I don't know. So I was gonna say I think it's the first one. Ooh, did I name this here twice?
Well, towards the end, he was kind of like staring out the window,
Ex
like he was
except
looking at him.
there, which I feel like he was just, and I think he said it. He said that he kept seeing Catherine everywhere in Harriton, and then in obviously Kathy. It was like the eyes or something about the face, right? The eyes was.
Mhm.
So I feel like he was just going crazy. Like these children are the only ones who are alive, and still keep seeing. And I'm like, I've had it,
Yeah.
and he just I guess went crazy himself. That's how I see it. I did see a little bit of the spookiness towards the end, but I'm like, I think he had just lost his mind.
A little at the beginning too when Lockwood like punches his hand through the window, then there's that broken glass. For me, like the
Yeah, that's
creepiest
what I was
part
gonna bring up.
and the part that like makes me think more of like gothic literature, like Edgar Allan Poe stuff, is like when Heathcliff is towards the end, he's going to the moors a lot in the nighttime, and I'm like, well, what is he doing out there, Is he talking to a ghost? Is he chilling by the grave? And it just reminds me a lot of like Edgar Allan Poe's poems about like when his love dies, and then he's like chilling in the coffin with them.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, that was like very reminiscent of gothic literature, and also just like the grunginess of the house, Wuthering Heights, like it's never described as like a bright light place. It's always like dark, empty of joy, things like that. There's just a lot of like angst, I think, in gothic literature too.
Yeah, I think that he was seeing Kathy, but I mean, I agree with you, Judith. I think he was also seeing them in the children, and that was like making him feel guilty. And I do think that he did
Mm-hmm.
care for Harriton. He just like wouldn't show it really, but I think like he did grow to care for him. But then I also think that it was like a mixture of like, oh, my plans for revenge are not making me happy anymore because
Yeah.
my son is actually happy. And then also, I think
Mm-hmm.
he's maybe been seeing Kathy the whole time, but
Mm-hmm.
like it's been like as his like revenge maybe ebbs away, it's like that is happening more and more, and he's
Mm-hmm.
like being driven kind of crazy by it.
And he might have changed in his older age too. Whew. So
What
there's
do you
this.
guys make of Harriton crying when Heathcliff died?
I
I
mean,
go
oh,
ahead.
gotcha.
No, go
You go
ahead,
first.
Karina. You go.
I really work with kids, so I just imagine like a little child being treated like that. It makes me feel like really like sad and angry. But kids will like always become very attached to like what's familiar to them, even if it doesn't make sense sometimes. An example is like once I was helping a few weeks ago, I was helping like a kinder student, and he was lost and he was very like emotionally distraught, and I was trying to help him find his teacher, and he seemed to know where to go because he just went running away to his teacher's line, but the teacher wasn't there. But like that spot where they line up, because they always line up there, is like familiar and safe to them, and they always want to go with like their teacher because that's like at school like what they feel comfortable with. So I feel like Harrington in his position, like Heathcliff was the only one somewhat there for him, because at least some of his basic needs in terms of like maybe food, clothes, and shelter were being met, if not like the emotional and intellectual needs. Because if he didn't have that, then maybe it was just too much for him to believe that he has nothing really. So he would rather like attach himself to Heathcliff and some idea of like maybe he does care for me. He's just like traumatized or disturbed, but
Mhm.
that might have been a better option to him than accepting like there's nothing, like no one cares about me.
Yeah, I was gonna say that too, because I think once his mom died, that's when he ended up with the dad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some I get the kids messed up or mixed up, but I think, and that's when the dad was like drinking so much because like he was right. So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like he wasn't as present, or maybe he's there, but he's not really there And even though Heathcliff, he wasn't the nicest, I think at least having him there and providing the necessities he needed at that time, even though, like I said, it wasn't, like a shelter and food, but even though he wasn't nice, he's still like grateful for that
Yeah.
and still loves him because if it wasn't for him, I mean,
And
maybe
then
dead.
from the PBS miniseries, and this wasn't like listed in the book, but now that I saw the miniseries, like it kind of does influence like how I see the book because there's a lot that's not necessarily said. But I feel like Hindley did become like an alcoholic, after his wife died, and he wasn't necessarily like a good role model or father figure to Hareton either. So maybe he was just like maybe Heathcliff is slightly better, or if not worse. I don't know. I felt really bad for him throughout the novel though.
He was also the one that was like really bad with money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like somehow Heathcliff has money, and then obviously, maybe Hareton looks up to him. He wants to be more like him than his actual father.
Right.
So maybe that's like seeing his hero die, because I mean, he didn't really interact with other people besides like what, Joseph maybe, but
Mm-hmm.
not gonna look at Joseph as a hero, I don't think.
I think Heathcliff also like for, the little that he can show for other people, I think he respected Hareton
Mm,
because Hareton was like more the kind of, you know, um, strong, like rugged, man of the earth kind of thing that he respects more than like, these gentleman type figures that, he can't relate to at all. Like the way
Mm-hmm.
he would talk about his own son was so dismissive and so like, patronizing, but he
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't talk about Hareton that way, even though he wasn't very kind and wouldn't really like he wouldn't teach Hareton how to read and he wouldn't like make him, like provide for his education or anything like that. But he still seemed to sort of like respect him and like and sadly like that's like the that's like the most he would show because he's so
very
consumed in revenge that like he's not a giving guy, he's not a very caring person, but like having like I also think like he respected Nellie, which
mm-hmm.
is why he would always like try to talk to Nellie about like helping him.
Yeah.
And Nellie wasn't, I think he respected Nellie because Nellie wasn't afraid of him, well, at least according to her account, she wasn't
Yeah.
afraid of him and like she could actually have a conversation with him instead of just getting like, like I feel like the most you can do with Heathcliff is like have his respect because then maybe he'll like sort of talk to you. Like he won't be nice, but he'll like sort of like talk to you instead of just like muttering about you and writing you off.
Mm-hmm.
Like he did that with Linton a lot, like both Lintons, like with younger Linton and older Linton too. He just like would mutter about like, he just would like do like, I don't care, I'm just gonna do whatever I want because they suck. Like he wouldn't
Yeah.
even make an attempt to try to work things out with them. Yeah, like again, like kind of going back to the whole like people not truly connecting and communicating with each other thing.
And I think it definitely is ironic that like Heathcliff hated Hindley so much, but like he was like okay towards his son. And I'm wondering now, just thinking like of things generation wise, like maybe he didn't want to be super hard to Hareton because his grandpa was the one that kind of took him into. So maybe he thought it would be like being ungrateful to the grandpa if he treated like Hareton super, super, super horribly compared to just like not really acknowledging him or because he wanted his revenge on Hindley. And at first I thought like maybe he would really hate Hareton because he was Hindley's son, but then I was like, well, maybe because he's the older gentleman's grandson, like maybe that'll help him.
Well, apparently also Hareton looked exactly like Kathy.
I forgot
Oh,
about
he
that.
says that
Yeah,
about the
that was really
eyes, right?
shocking to me.
Yeah.
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 Like even more than younger Kathy, Hareton
Mhm.
looked like older Kathy.
Which I was like, why is that? But it's the brother.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sometimes your kid might not look like you. They might look like your sibling or the aunt or the uncle, which
Mhm.
uh, that's like I said before, I feel like that's what contributed to the whole like, oh my gosh, you're right there, but you're not there, and I love you so much, and I
Mhm.
hate it. And maybe he did start like imagining seeing
That
her.
probably drove him crazy, yeah.
Yeah. He's like, you're there, but you're not. Yeah.
And then maybe Heathcliff, I mean, I feel like he did get pretty good revenge in Hindley in terms of like, you know, taking his little home and, you know, things like that. And maybe that's why he wanted to keep Tarleton close too, so that Hindley wouldn't even have that. But, and I lost, of course, the point I was trying to make. Oh, no, I found it. After he got his revenge on Hindley, like that was like his main purpose for so much of the books. Maybe that did make him taper down in terms of his grumpiness and evilness at the end. Although maybe it still wasn't like enough. I don't know.
Maybe
It's so
he's like,
complicated with him.
I've accomplished what I wanted to do. Now what? Like he's looking for more.
Now I can go hang out at the moors and just, you know,
Yeah.
his mind was so consumed with revenge, but like without that purpose, like maybe there wasn't much left for him mentally, you know, in terms of a life purpose.
Yeah, I definitely don't think at that point, like he literally was running on revenge for like 20 years or something.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and now like, you know, Cassie's died, Linton's died, his son Linton's died. He owns everything. His son is, you know, or his whatever, his Harriton is like not someone he hates. And
Mhm.
like what's left? Like
Mm-hmm.
he doesn't have any other outlet, or he's accomplished or like everything that he wanted to accomplish, and he has nothing left. So he has nothing left to live for, like literally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's why I think it was just natural that he just died, you know, because like his purpose in the story was done, and now it was like about for the ending, it's about the younger ones.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think he was like beyond trying to move on.
Yeah.
Like I just don't think, even if like let's say it was modern times
Mhm.
and he like had access to like a therapist, like I feel like he would never do it. Like he would
Oh.
never be open to help. He just like is that kind of a person that is like, I'm all or nothing.
Right.
Like I'm going to be all in on this, and otherwise like I don't even want to live anymore.
Yeah.
Which makes it very tragic and very gothic.
Yes, for sure.
Like I
He's a
love you,
very
but I
gothic
can't have you,
character.
so I'm killing myself. Too dramatic. Did Kathy's dad die first and then it was Linton? Or yeah? Okay.
Older Linton and then younger Linton.
Oh,
Edgar
yeah.
Linton and then
Yeah, see,
Linton
that's
Heathcliff.
I think that's the thing that got me confused because she's like, "Oh no, my dad," and then they're like, "Oh, Linton is dying." He's like, "No, no, he's not. No, this time he is dying." And I was like,
Yeah.
"So is he dead, or is he not dead?
He
Tell
came
me."
back from the dead. God,
Yeah, I was like, "Oh my god, he died," and then
I
he was
hated
alive.
Linton so much, like younger Linton. Like I was like, I'll take Heathcliff over you. You're the worst.
Yeah,
He's just so petty, yeah.
yeah, I don't like him.
I didn't feel I just don't even feel bad for him in any way. I just think he was terrible.
In my head, I'm like, how did Kathy fall in love with him? Like, yes, maybe there's not a lot of people out there, right? And they're sending love letters to each other or whatever. But I'm like, I don't know.
Well, initially he did like show interest, or like he was more like devoted to her, like saying that the time with her was like well spent and that it really helped him. But then after a while, yeah, it was like basically what's it called? Backstabbed her because he didn't even care.
He trapped her in the
It
house,
was
yeah.
just
Yeah.
it was just all for
Yeah.
marriage
Yeah.
and to fulfill his dad's plan.
And I just didn't like the whole like, oh, I'm gonna get better if you're with me and you love me. I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
I know.
That's
Get
super
out.
toxic, yeah.
Get out. Like,
Toxic red flag.
ew. Just ew.
Like obsessive love.
Mhm.
Which it's funny that he was kind of like that, so I wonder like how much influence Heathcliff had on it, but also mirrors Heathcliff's obsessive love with Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was a very selfish person, just maybe because of his condition and always being waited on and doted on, and just naturally he just didn't seem to really care very much about other people.
Yeah.
And then Heathcliff kind of weaponized that in order to get him to do what he wanted.
Yeah.
Because he was like, okay, well, I'm going to threaten you. And so Linton doesn't really care as long as he's not hurt. So he's just like, ensnares, helps his dad, like, marry him off to Kathy.
Yeah. And it seems that Linton Younger was much more frightened of Heathcliff than Harrington was. So I could understand like why he got to that point, especially to imagining when he was younger, and just based on like the awkward marriage situation with his mom, I can't imagine that they really went out in society a lot. So I don't think he was probably very well socialized either. That was probably all he knew, which didn't set him up to like be resilient or have empathy or be able to like think much further beyond like his own needs, especially since he was sick a lot.
Yeah, have any of you read The Secret Garden?
Yes, he so reminds me of like that boy at the beginning.
Yeah, it so reminded me of like an evil version of Colin from The Secret Garden. If any of you haven't read it, like it's all another old book, but Colin is the main character's like cousin, and he's an invalid. Like he is always inside, and he's very selfish like this, and is always like begging her to play with him. Like he actually like grows and like is not like an inherently awful guy like Linton, but it's kind of similar to that.
Is that a movie or a show? Like obviously old movie.
It's a movie too. It's the same author that did A Little Princess, Frances, what's her name?
Frances Hodgson Burnett or something, right?
Yeah. So it's also like a movie, but it's originally a book. Really good book. I remember reading it as a kid.
Somehow I have like I remember a scene or two. I don't know if we saw it in school, which to me sounds kind of weird.
I think we watched it in school, so
yeah. So maybe it was a thing.
Yeah.
Probably. I remember reading the book, but
I remember seeing the
so
book.
I don't remember the story.
I think so. Why would we watch this? What?
Both books are pretty good.
How great is this?
Yeah, I love both books a lot. And A Little Princess, the movie, is like, love.
I haven't seen it. I'm gonna reread it and then watch the movie. Thanks for that.
It's on Netflix. It's like Alfonso Cuarón's, like who's like an amazing director now. It's like one of his first movies, and it's so good. Oh my god, it's like a little storybook movie. I love it.
Yeah, I've read A Little Princess multiple times. I think I like it better than Secret Garden, but definitely different themes. But it's just like so sad at some point. I'm like, oh
Wait, they made a new Secret Garden one? A 2020?
Yeah, I think they did like a few years ago. I haven't seen it. I've only seen the old one, the 90s one.
I remember the old one. Because someone said it's not great, but it's not bad. For the new one. It's okay. That's funny. It was. Let's see. It says one of the questions I found, I thought there were more, but this is like one or like 4 questions in one. Do you guys know who George Barnett Smith is? I'm guessing he's an author because they mention in another one Virginia Woolf and some other person. And they say that he describes Wuthering Heights as perhaps one of the most unpleasant books ever written. What do you think may have troubled him, as well as other 19th century readers of the novel?
Can I say the second part again? So Bart says, what do you think?
What do you think may have troubled Smith, the guy who said this is the most unpleasant book ever written? As well as, so he and other 19th century readers that read this novel have said that or agree with him. Why do you think that is? What do you think troubled him to say that?
Oh, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Did you guys read the preface or listen to it?
Preface.
For some reason, mine kept going, and it was like chapter 35, preface, and I was like, it's an hour long. So I was driving, so I just like listened to part of it, but it kind of touched on that a little bit, like at the beginning. It's like they're talking about, I don't know, some animals, and I don't remember the whole details, but basically saying that it was like confusing, and it's a very confusing book overall, and that's why they didn't like it. Something like that. It was kind of weird. I didn't keep listening, so I don't know
I
all the
think
details.
I started listening a little bit after, and then I was like, wait, this isn't the book, it's someone's opinion. And I was like, I don't want your
Yeah,
opinion. Let me
exactly.
create my
Because then
own.
she starts breaking down
Yeah,
the
analyzing it.
sections. Yeah.
Mhm.
I like reading those prefaces after sometimes because I agree. Like it's good to see like sometimes they're like English professors and some things I'm like, okay, they're professional, but sometimes I wait till after. For me, I think I'm just thinking about other Gothic literature I've read. I feel like it's that line between what one might call like obsessive romantic love versus obsessive romantic toxic love, because I feel like there's other books that are like, oh, popular, they're so in love, they can't let go even though the person said, but this one, it's like there's points in the novel where like Heathcliff and Kathy, that they're mean to each other, they start getting jealous and they're kind of like evil towards each other. And even Heathcliff's like words towards Kathy once she's with Linton, I just feel like they were more like hateful and spiteful versus like a different perspective that he might have taken. So I feel like that part definitely is off-putting. And I think just like how the characters demonstrate hatred to each other just feels very like strongly emotionally charged compared to other like books that I've read from about this time. I feel like that's probably what would be most off-putting.
Yeah, I feel like around this time it was all about like your status and your manners and like fitting in with society. And this book is very raw, and its characters like behaving really terribly to each other and like being and behaving like with their worst impulses. And I feel like that would be really shocking probably to people just to read at the time. I'm sure there were like people have emotions throughout time, but in terms of like literature, I don't know if books back then were like getting this raw. Like now there are books written, that get really gritty, that get like really deep into people's feelings and bad behaviors and stuff. But maybe around this time it was like really shocking to people. And even to art, like even with us, like a lot of the characters like were very like Heathcliff is just like a very difficult character. Hindley, had some really, awful things that he did. Kathy, the original one, also was pretty unpleasant at times. So I think it's just a very raw book, and even now it's shocking to read sometimes.
I like what you said about society, Paula, because it reminds me like that society was so big, like you said, and even religion was so big, but these characters are not acting like in proper ways or ways that would be considered good under like, the most typical religion, which probably would be Christianity. And I feel like that would be tough for people to read. Maybe even tough for them to say if they liked it or not. Someone said, "Oh, I like it." Back then, someone else might be like, "Why? Like, this isn't proper."
Exactly.
But the characters definitely don't fit like those like roles that are easily consumed, like the heroine or the damsel in distress. Like they're very different. So I feel like people would be surprised at that. And then I think it might also be influenced that, the author is a woman. So maybe even though maybe they didn't know right away, like if that came out, like maybe they would be like slower to like it too, because they'd be like, oh, like, you wrote this, it's wrong with this because of this, and it's because she's a woman or something compared to like other authors. So there's that bias as well that people from back then might have held.
I think they all published under male pseudonyms, at least at first. But I don't know if they later published under their own names while they were alive, or if that was way later. But initially, they had male pen names.
Yeah, I think
like Jane Austen, same. I think Jane Austen's like very early on, I think, used a male pen name. I could be wrong.
I like what both of you guys said. I was gonna go with Karina's, but the whole exaggeration of like it's romance but not really romance. It's it is that fine line that goes a little bit over, and you're like, I don't know about that. But I do like what you mentioned, Paola, because it while you guys were talking about that, it reminded me of how, you know, how you said if people are reading this and you say you like it kind of goes with like, you know, when people are reading 50 Shades of Grey, when it was all like, oh my gosh, you're reading porn and all that stuff. It was because it wasn't very out there. So I can
Mhm.
see why maybe they're like, they find it unpleasant because of, you know, the different classes. And then we have a servant, a maid being the main character talking to, you know, they're like, why should we listen to you? You know, like it's her thoughts. Um, telling someone else's story, but still. So yeah.
I wonder, like, this is really making me think hard about this, but even though Heathcliff is the villain, and one would say, like, you know, how he died, kind of how we discussed, he didn't have a purpose at the end. But although his purpose was revenge, like, I think he did succeed in that. So maybe people didn't like that this, you know, ruffian, you know, lower class, who knows who, was able to like dismantle
Mhm.
someone in high society. You know, if the person reading it is in high society, they'd be like, oh my God, like I wouldn't want that to happen to me. So I don't like this novel. So maybe, you know, that depending like on the role that they had, you know, I think that could have had an influence too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
The follow-up question for that was just how does it remain unsettling today, which I feel like we kind of talked about.
Yeah, we just
Yeah.
covered it. Yeah. Yeah, societal norms and what's acceptable or what's not, like definitely have a big impact.
Mhm.
I
For
think
me,
we're just not used to reading, like I think now we're more used to reading kind of about toxic relationships.
mhm,
But this one is like,
extreme.
it's very unpleasant. Like,
Mhm.
there's no way, I don't think that anyone would read about this relationship and be like, yeah, they should be together.
Yeah, like it's definitely making me compare it to some of Edgar Allan Poe's poetry, but I feel like in his poetry, it's like the you know the female lover is always like so beautiful and so perfect, and the guy is like so obsessed, which maybe it's like not a good obsession, but it's always like this pure love and meant to be, la la la, heaven sent. But versus this one, this is like a rough love, you know, it's not pretty,
It's
you
a hate
know,
love. It's a love
yeah,
hate.
yeah, exactly. So I feel like that's to me what stands out the most because I well actually I don't know how Edgar Allan Poe's work was received like in his time, but it reminds me too of Little Women. There's a part where Jo's like writing and then she starts writing all these fantastical things that maybe are not like the most high class things, but she's doing it to sell like to newspapers to make money. And then after there's a part where she's like so ashamed of what she's written and she wants to write something that's actually quote unquote good.
Mhm.
It's a small part of the book, but it reminds me of that too.
Is that when the professor like reads her book and tells her like, you're better than this?
Yeah, and she gets all ashamed and embarrassed.
Mm.
What would you guys rate it?
Mhm.
Well, I would rate it pretty
Mm.
high. I think I would rate it like a 4.75. Um,
Wow, that is high.
I think that I don't know. I really I just found it so interesting, and I found it so and like I was impressed with it, I guess, just
Mhm.
because I feel like for its time it was so like revolutionary and interesting, and I feel like it's had so many influences to today, and I
Mhm.
found the characters to be so interesting. Like I do think that some parts of it were a little bit like repetitive and hard to get through, but I still like came out of it really admiring the book and like feeling for the characters. Um so yeah, I mean like this was like our classics month, and I feel like this is a classic. Like I got that feeling from reading it. So none of this it sounds that personal, but that's why I rate it higher.
Also would give it between a 4 or 5 and a 5. I gave it a 5 on Goodreads just because I wasn't sure how much I would like it. I think similar to some others, it's a book that I've always wanted to read but never actually got around to reading it.
Yeah.
And I thought I wasn't gonna like it that much. But it is so different and it is very interesting and the characters have multiple layers and it's just evil, dramatic, and angsty, which are things that I enjoy. And I just think for the time it was very different, and I admire the author for the kind of lifestyle that she led, that she was able to produce such a novel. I think it's really amazing. And it is a genre I like too. That's it for me.
I don't do
Yeah, I
Gothic.
don't like it as much as Jane Eyre. I like Jane Eyre more.
I haven't read
But
that one, so I'll have to.
it's kind of gothic. It's the sister. It's an actual romance though.
See, that's what, like I was expecting, and that's what I also read, that a lot of people were expecting the more romancy, but it's not. So I mean, I'm glad I read it. I'm glad. I mean, I also wanted to pitch it. I forgot who pitched it, but I wanted to, because clearly I had it, and I've always wanted to. I just never get to it because I'm like, yeah, I don't really know what it's about. Will I understand? I don't know. Is it that interesting? I don't know. I give it a 3.5 because I think I want to dive like deep and like slow into it, instead of like I have to read it and finish it for the book club, like, because
Yeah, I see that.
I started rereading a little bit and I was like, oh duh, like I feel like I need to just dive deeper into it.
Be in the zone for it.
What was that?
Like be in the zone for it.
Yeah, not just like I said, I have to read from here to here. It's more like, oh, let me read and let me continue, and like at my own pace, and like if I'm super into it, then I'll finish it, at night, that whole like, 2 days or whatever, if I'm really into it. But I feel like because of the time frame, I didn't get to fully, immerse myself, and then like my actual social life also got in the way. So I was reading and listening and reading and listening. So 3.5, but it might change my mind if I reread it. We'll see.
I definitely see that, yeah.
Yeah.
I'd give it a 4. I feel like the beginning was really hard for me, but once I like actually got into reading it and also listening, because I did a mixture of both. Like I actually really wanted to know what was going on, and I feel like I actually kept up for the most part.
Yeah, I think you
And
did
I feel
out of most books.
yeah, because I don't know, somehow I guess I kind of had more time, or I just like made the time for it. And then once I was actually reading it, I was just like, oh, okay, like it makes sense. And it's just a different story, but it definitely does want you to, like keeps you captivated enough that you want to see what's going to happen next, or what's going to happen to this character, especially knowing that, or in the beginning, like knowing that Catherine died. It's like you want to see how she died, why,
that's
how that's going to like change everything. Yeah. So I felt like it was pretty good, especially for a classic. I really thought I wasn't gonna like it, because I feel like, I don't know, I guess I just thought classics are boring, but I've never actually read them.
Pride and Prejudice, that one will have us laughing.
Yeah.
Some classics are definitely boring.
Yeah.
Like I could never get into like the Iliad.
Heart of Darkness was
really
boring for me.
I think because of those, I was like, I hated that book.
I was gonna say, I think this is my first classic, but it's not. I guess Heart of Darkness is a classic, but you were forced to read it, or at least I was forced to read it in school, so I don't count it. This is technically my elective classic. So yeah, I also had a little bit of fear because it was the first one, not on my own, but like, I actually was gonna go through the whole thing, that I wasn't gonna understand and that I wasn't gonna like it. But I do have like some interest. Pretty cool. I do want to read more though. I want to read the ones Paola mentioned. More romancy. Let's see.
I think you all would really enjoy Pride and Prejudice. It'd be a fun one to discuss.
Yeah, it's super enjoyable.
It's pretty long, huh?
Oh, not too much.
No?
Pride and Prejudice is short.
It's like less than 400, I think.
Jane Eyre is pretty long.
Maybe I'm confusing them. Yeah, maybe it's that one. Oh, Katie said, she didn't give me a long explanation. It was just pretty quick. I like that she sent me her rating. She's like, hey, I can't make it, but here's my rating. She's like, I'm excited for Spooky Month. And my rating is 3.5. She said, it's a classic, but difficult to read. That's it. I was like, okay, Katie, cool. That's it.
Wait, is Jane Eyre the one with the girl and she's like very opinionated and then la la la? Like, no,
Mm-mm.
I'm confusing it with something else.
No, it's she is a governess and she is in a school for girls where she's mistreated, and then she goes to work for what's his name? Shoot.
I'm confusing it with Emma. Never mind. I remember
No,
the title.
no. It's gothic. It's super gothic. It is not rom-com.
I
It's
didn't
like a
like Emma
gothic
as much.
romance.
Okay, cool. Thank
And
you.
she goes to work for this older man.
Cute.
And they kind of have a little thing,
No,
but there's
no,
some
off the
weird.
books.
But no, he's not like that old. It's just like in that time, like he's her boss. He's her boss. And then like he's teaching like this little kid, and there's this weird sound in the house. And what is that? And yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's good.
Definitely
really
confusing
good.
with Emma because I know someone whose favorite author is Jane Austen, and so we are talking about the books and they recommended Emma. I was like, okay, I'll try it, but I mean, I think that Pride and Prejudice I definitely like much more than Emma.
There's so many good adaptations of Jane Austen too, if you don't want to read. Plus, there's a really good Jane Eyre adaptation with Michael Fassbender, who I love. He plays the guy. So if you don't want to read the book, watch the movie. It's actually really good.
I think I'll read the book because then I will never read the book. If I watch the movies or the show, I'm just gonna picture the movie and the show, even though it might not be the same. I'm gonna be like, nah, why read it now?
I think you'll like it, Judith. It's one that I've reread several times and I've enjoyed it every time.
Okay.
Julie, are you still there? Do you have a reading?
She did say she was tired earlier today. We were almost all falling asleep. So it's okay if you
She can put it in the
Crystal!
So
I mean, semi-awake. Look at her. What's your
She's all
rating?
tucked in.
Pretty asleep, guys.
Oh my god, she is all tucked in.
Your rating?
It's pending.
Andy,
She didn't
You didn't
finish.
finish?
She didn't finish.
Oh.
Like, I probably did a third of the reading.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was really bad with keeping up. It just wasn't like capturing me.
Mm.
Really hard time connecting to it. I just like snooze.
Well,
But I wanted to see you guys. Like, let me pop in.
nice to see you.
Always a pleasure.
But she said it was a 2.
Oh.
No, I don't think
Had
I
to
don't think it. Okay, go ahead.
No, you had to out me.
She didn't finish, so it's not an honest rating. So maybe whenever you do finish, you can let us know. She's like, never.
I know. I wouldn't say it all.
She's like,
I've already turned the audible.
The audible was pretty good.
No, yeah, it's like I felt like the audiobook was a little easier to follow than the
Yeah,
But-
the narrator was really good.
Yeah,
I
at first
liked
was
her a
like,
lot.
yeah, but
There's just so many others to read.
okay. Well, the next section I wrote it down in her.
Oh my god, put this
Okay.
out YouTube video. I don't want anybody to see me in pajamas.
Oh
but,
my gosh.
well, let me fix my hair.
I'm always in my pajamas.
Up to page 132. Once you hit this line, don't read it or don't continue.
Is there no chapters in this next book?
Oh wait, Judith. Were we stopping at chapter 4 or chapter 4, section 3?
What's that?
The picture I sent you was just chapter 4.
What
But I
page
can-
is that?
Chapter 4 is page 125.
Oh, we're stopping at 132.
Okay, let me send you the picture of that one. I made a mistake.
That might be hard because I don't have sections. I only have chapters.
I think it's chapter. You know what? Let's do chapter 4. Do you want to start your chapter 4, Paula, just to see if it says Danny and Ralphie.
Let me.
Chapter 4.
Oh,
Danny
Right.
Glick
Yeah.
and Others.
Don't go past that.
Chapter 4.
okay.
Danny Glick and Others.
So just stop at chapter 4 then.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of chapter 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Also, I wanted to show you another book I bought when I bought Salem's Lot for Rico. I bought this one, The Exorcist. This is the
Oh.
scariest one ever written.
Is
I
that
might-
like the movie?
Yes,
Mhm.
it's also considered one of the scariest movies. I
didn't
might
think
not
it
read
was
it at
that
the same time as
scary.
Salem's Lot. I might
That's
save it
scary.
for November. But yeah,
The
It's a
one
good
I'm gonna
movie,
read-
but it's not that scary. You
I
can
find it
handle
comedic, honestly. My
Yeah.
mom always has described it as the scariest movie she's ever seen, but she saw it when she was little. I think it came out like in the early 1970s. My mom probably was like less than 7 when she saw it. And she told my sister and I never watched that movie. And one time my mom was gone and we had Netflix and we said, hey, let's watch it. And she was like, yeah. I think my sister was 12, so I was probably like 16, 17. And we watched it and we were like, okay, it wasn't that scary.
That's
Yeah,
like
I
my
was so
younger sister.
scared, but when it before, I was like, oh, it's gonna be so scary. And it wasn't at all.
I find The Omen scarier and creepier than The Exorcist,
Mhm.
actually, just because of like how that movie goes down. But
Hmm.
I'm not sure why.
I'll have to rewatch it. See what's up.
If any of you want to see a scary movie in theaters, you should see
Smile.
Barbarian.
Oh. Mm.
See
What's that?
Barbarian. I will not tell you anything.
Oh.
Okay.
You should go in not knowing anything. I knew nothing. I hadn't
Oh.
even watched the trailer, and it's very surprising.
Oh,
I was
wow.
saying that Salem's Lot is also a movie because it has now a major motion picture.
Yeah, I think it is a movie. I've never like seen it, but you know how I know it's a movie?